Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's 10-Minute Tales. This is for young Eddie Utley, as I know he likes ghost stories. It's called The Curse of the Clock, a ghost story by Harry Riley. This story is fiction, and resemblance to anyone, living or dead, is coincidental. George Kendal was a creature of instinct, and now as he drove through the little Derbyshire village, he spotted a bric-a-brac store called Twice Used Emporium, and thought it was worth stopping off for a quick browse. His business was restoring old clocks and selling them for a big profit. His large house was full of timepieces he'd renovated, and they came in all shapes and sizes. Today he wandered into the dusty old shop with a casual air and gazed around. Most of the items were rubbish, but his eyes eventually lit upon a long case clock in a corner, covered in a thick layer of dust and almost completely obscured by piles of rubbishy furniture, tables, chairs and discarded books. The owner, a shifty-looking old man wearing a dirty brown overcoat, badly in need of a shave and a surly expression on his yellowish face, gave his visitor a brief nod, which seemed as much as he could manage, and then perched himself awkwardly on the corner of a rickety trestle table. His eyes furtively watched George's every movement, as the visitor examined various pieces of mild interest. On his way out again, turning to face the shopkeeper, he asked, "Just a thought, but how much might you be asking for the grandfather clock?" The shopkeeper wiped his running nose with a deft flick of his cuff, and replied in a surprisingly deep and rasping voice, "Sorry, mate, it's not for sale. It's a family heirloom, and you couldn't pay me enough to part with it. If you come back next week, I'll have another one, though. This one has only been stored here while I'm repainting the house." George thanked him and said he would call back. He knew the man was tricking him and would immediately start cleaning and polishing the clock to demand a better price. When, if he returned, he would be offered the same one again, patched up and in the guise of another. George had experienced most traders' tricks as he'd wandered about the country searching for bargains, and was quite prepared to haggle for this item, as he recognised it was almost certainly a genuine antique long case. The following week he breezed into the village odds and ends shop, and right in the middle stood a well-polished grandfather clock. Within seconds the inner curtain was withdrawn and the owner appeared. "Ah, so you're back again, eh?" George Kendal acknowledged his greeting and feigned ignorance of any deception, as he went straight up to the clock. "So I take it this is your other clock? Looks in reasonable condition?" "It doesn't work. You'd need to get the mechanism fixed." It was clear the shop dealer had no idea of the importance of his clock, and the final price of £400 George Kendal agreed to pay was only a fraction of its true value of many thousands of pounds, when restored to proper working order. He was delighted to have put one over on the dealer, and greedily anticipated a huge profit. Once he had it in his workshop, George began to strip it down, and after several days of intensive oiling and toiling, stood back to admire his work. The wood was quality mahogany, with an 11-inch dial, the 4 seasons depicted in each corner, and the maker's name, Jonathan Monckton of Norwich, inscribed on a cartouche mounted around the top arch. Below this was a hunting scene. The trunk bore finely fluted columns, and George Kendal estimated the age of the clock as early 18th century, the fine patina of the mahogany bearing this out. The 8-day movement was now functioning and chiming correctly, and he would start on several weeks of time trials, during which he would make final adjustments before offering it up for sale. If only things could have been that simple. After 6 days of failing to keep correct time, George was beginning to pull his hair out in despair. He tried everything, but success eluded him. Standing back, he noticed for the first time that the clock had a slight lean to one side. Removing the plinth and upending it, he examined the 4 short feet. 3 were solid wood, but the 4th was hollow. His searching fingers sprung open a secret hinge at the back, and he removed a rolled-up piece of silk with Old English writing on it. Later, an antiquities scholar examined the cloth under a powerful magnifying glass, and gave his verdict. "What you have here, my friend, is a good old-fashioned clockmaker's curse." A wealthy squire commissioned this timepiece, and refused to pay, which was quite a common occurrence in those days, but which placed Jonathan Monckton in penury, leaving him to die in a debtor's prison. As he set up the clock, Monckton hid this curse where it would not be discovered, and the curse condemns the squire's soul to everlasting torment inside the clock. That night, as George slept, he was awakened by a change of tone to the cursed timekeeper. The chime appeared to have a deathly morbid echo that reverberated throughout the whole house. He crept downstairs, and there in the dim light from his torch he saw the clock was pulsing with a ghostly green phosphorescence. It was still chiming the midnight hour, and he heard an agonised moaning coming from within. Whatever could it be? "If you have any pity, please let me out. I have been trapped inside here for 200 years, and cursed for all eternity." Horrified, George asked what he could do. "Turn the winding key backwards as hard as you can to break the spell, and we will both be at peace." Shaken with terror, the sleeping man tried to oblige. He forced the large key backwards with all of his might. There came a crack, followed by a loud bang, and then he heard a triumphant whoop of joy. "Free, I'm free at last." George Kendal would have joined in the excitement, but suddenly he felt very strange. He couldn't move, and was seeing the room from a funny angle. And then the penny dropped. He had exchanged places with the ghost, and was now locked inside the clock. 6 months later, a man out walking with his young family stopped outside a small bric-a-brac shop called Twice Used Emporium. They begged him to inquire about the imposing grandfather clock inside. "Can we buy it for our new house, please?" Inside the shop, the shifty old man in the brown overcoat smiled to himself and absently patted his wallet. End.